Hello everybody. I've got a question today from someone. It says, why are childhood beliefs about work and money so entrenched? Thank you for that. What a great message, or a great question. I actually think that's quite an easy one, if I'm honest. And I'm talking probably to a lot of the children that were brought up by post-war parents. Can you believe that back in the day when we were, in the 41, 42, 43, 40, right the way through that Second World War, we had rationing. You could only have a certain amount of sugar, butter, bacon, cheese, eggs. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that. But that's the parents that, obviously my parents, that was the environment that my parents were brought up in. And of course, what was it, you can't have a lot, you can't have an abundance of that. We have to limit that. And I know for me growing up, I heard a lot of money doesn't grow on trees. No, we can't afford that. My parents were very hardworking and they struggled to pay the mortgage. It was only when I look back, wow, it was nothing compared to what house prices are now, but actually they struggled to pay the mortgage. My dad worked 7 days a week. He worked nights and weekends to be able to afford that mortgage. They had second-hand furniture. So of course, in those first 7 years and beyond, what did I see? What did I get told? What was the environment? What was the culture that we were all brought up in? And it was very much, and I think a lot of us were in the same boat. I know some of us weren't, but I think, most of us were. It wasn't, and I remember being at school, I don't remember actually being anyone that was like super well off. I wasn't aware of that. We all seemed the same to me, like doesn't matter who we were, we all seemed to have the same, there wasn't a lot going around. And so I think those childhood beliefs about money are intrinsically taught very early on. There's not enough. Money doesn't grow on trees. No, you can't have that. Money was important because, without it, you just didn't eat. And if you didn't eat, you didn't survive. And money was about, paying the rent or the bills or the mortgage. So you had a roof over your house, over your heads, and had food on the table. And I think that first 7 years is where we're being programmed and conditioned. So these are really entrenched beliefs. I definitely had a poverty mentality. There's not enough, there's never enough, there'll never be enough, there wasn't enough, there'll never... I mean, when I think back to my parents and what they probably went through. So, of course, everything was precious. My dad, was born in Cyprus and he lived in a village, didn't have a lot. I don't think he had shoes for the first few years of his life. And so money was tight. Food, you didn't waste food. You didn't waste anything. And, my dad still today will repair something rather than buy it new because he's pretty good and handy like that. And so he'll put tape on it and goodness knows. So because he knows how hard things are to come by. Money was and of course, they're the values that I was brought up with. And so, of course, they're entrenched. They're part of my DNA, part of my structure, part of my scripting. Deeply entrenched. And so, work. Well, what did we get told? As soon as I was old enough, I had to go out and get a job. I mean, I didn't go to uni. So, of course, there wasn't a question of I'm going to have a gap year or maybe there was like, get out and get a job. Now, it wasn't said like that, but that was the inference, that was inferred, that was just as it was. Because money's hard to come by, so don't be sitting around doing nothing. I mean, we live in such a different world. All the kids, we've been at school, have a gap year, go off and travel, which is fantastic. I mean, gosh, wouldn't that have been wonderful? But for those of us of my age group, we didn't get taught that. And so, of course, their parents got taught that by their parents and, they teach us and then we teach that to our kids. Well, and I remember, I'm sure I said to my kids, money doesn't grow on trees. I'm sure I said, no, you can't have that. No, I can't afford that. I had 3 kids all wanting stuff. I didn't have the money for that. I remember walking around the shops one day and my little boy said, "Oh, can we have ice cream, Mummy?" And I was like, "Honey, we can't afford that this week. Maybe next week." He just shrugged his shoulders, and what was he going to do? He just, but that, and so I passed that on, and maybe he'll do that to his kids, because that's what he got taught. And this is hereditary. This is gone down by generations, so this is intrinsic in our DNA. It's in our DNA. It's not just in our minds. It's in our bodies. It's in our DNA. This is what we got taught from. So why are they? Because that's what we got taught, and then we believe it. I know people have got actually quite wealthy, got a bit of money. They've still got that poverty mentality. They're still a bit mean with themselves. They don't spend the money. They're a bit tight in terms of, money was hard to come by. So, I don't want to spend it, even if they've got it. How many people I hear say, well, you can't take it with us. And I think they're trying to tell themselves, well, spend it, have what you want. And a lot of us aren't good at that. If we've had this conditioning, there's never enough, there's not enough. And I don't know how much enough is. It's funny because we always had enough to pay the bills. I always had food on the table. We never sat in the dark and the cold because we couldn't afford our bills. But the thinking is there's never enough. There'll never be enough. And now look at us, it's like, how much do we need to retire? How much are we being told we need in our super? There's not enough. Our basic fear is being triggered of safety and security. And it's about security. And I don't think that's changed to some degree. I think we all want more. No, it's never enough money. Never enough money. We want more. No, more money in the bank, more money in our super, more money, more. It's never enough. How much is enough? And so these things are set in patterns very early on, but they come from generations before us. And that's why they're so entrenched. And, I remember I've always had enough money. A couple of times in my life where maybe we've struggled a lot and didn't have money to pay, but we survived. We might not have had enough money to pay rent that week or the mortgage that month, but I survived. I got through it. I was never on the street. I never went hungry. There's always been enough. My reality is I've had an abundance. I go out and buy what I want. I've never really had to ration myself. I often wonder about what it would have been like back in the day when, you could only have a certain amount of sugar per person per week. Can you imagine telling your kids now, no, you've had your rationing for the week? It'd be hilarious, wouldn't it? Well, let's hope we never have to do that. And so I get why it's so entrenched, but you have to work against your own conditioning. This is why once you realize what your neural pathways and how they've been created, you can uncreate them. You can tell yourself a different story, and you do it the same way you were told that story, by repeating, I am abundant, I am rich, I am wealthy, and knowing that you are. You've probably never gone without. You've perhaps always had enough. It might not have been loads over, but you've always had enough. And so in those moments, you are abundant. And I've rewired that in a lot. And I feel so different to the way I did. Because at one time I was very it was always lack. I'd never enough. There's never enough. And now I don't feel that way at all. I feel like I am rich beyond measure. I've got more than enough. I am wealthy. Anyone that, has food in their cupboard and change in their pocket, in today's, taken throughout the world, that you're a wealthy, rich person. And so we are beyond abundant. And we have to rewire that in. You have to, first of all, be aware of how you've been conditioned. I've not enough, there's not enough, there's never enough. And fear around what about happening in the future? What if I don't have enough? It doesn't matter that you've got enough right now, but what about next year, 5 years or 10 years? Will there be enough? Before I worked, there was always kind of enough, yeah? But then you work and you have that extra money coming. I never felt the benefit of that extra work and money. And I realized why, because it just went into the coffers and I spent it. You kind of spend what you earn. Sometimes if you have a credit card, you might spend beyond what you earn. I mean, we did that for a little bit too until we learned, no, that's probably not going to work for us, and we got rid of all our credit cards. And so we don't earn more than we don't spend more than we earn. And I think that's wisdom, that's wise. These days, people, throw credit cards at you, and it's almost like they encourage you to go into debt. Well, I think that's a miserable kind of existence. And a lot of money, a lot of people who look like they've got a lot, perhaps owe a lot, and that can cause a lot of stress. And in that sense, maybe they feel like there's never enough. I think understanding where you're at, how you got to where you're at, realizing you've been conditioned, you've been programmed, and if you've been programmed and conditioned, then you can unprogram and uncondition yourself by thinking on purpose something new, because a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. So if you keep thinking, there's not enough, there won't be enough. But if you start to choose to believe that there's enough, there's always been enough, I'll always have enough, then I wonder what difference that would make. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. And I don't think, we talk about affirmations. For me, affirmations are not, every now and again when you think about it. It's like you have to do it on purpose every day for a certain amount of time to create a neural pathway. Your neural pathways were created over time, over and over again. You heard this little story. There's not enough. There's not enough. No, you can't have that. Money doesn't grow on trees, And so you have to rewire it the same way it got wired. Sorry, there's a noise over there and I'm just looking around to see what it is. That's a bit weird. Anyway, there's nothing there. It's just the teddies. So, why are childhood beliefs about work and money so entrenched? Because they've been taught to us over generations and generations and generations of beliefs. You are not just a product of what your parents taught you and what you now think. You are a product of all the generations before you. And I love that, because I realize when you decide to change, you are not just changing you in the now, you are changing all the generations that are after you. Do you understand how important you are, and when you do the work, and how important this is? And making a little bit of effort here by thinking on purpose, I choose to believe. I mean, and this is the other thing. Because your subconscious has always felt poor, or there's not enough, that's what they consider. The subconscious feels it's safe. If I'm poor, then I'm safe. And this is why a lot of people, they get a lot of money, they might win the lottery, and they'll just spend it. They're not used to it. They don't know how to handle it. No, it's not they don't know how to handle it. It's their core belief is it's not safe to have money. I've never had money, so I don't know what to do with money. And so you do have to change the way you think about money, because a lot of us feel like, well, we don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of lots of money. I wouldn't know what to do with millions of dollars. And so changing your mindset, choosing to believe on purpose, I am abundant. I am wealthy beyond measure. And you say that over and over and over again. If you want to put a limit on it, then do it 50 times every day. In the morning, have one sentence. I'm wealthy, rich and abundant. That's a good one. I'm wealthy, rich and abundant. I'm wealthy, rich and abundant. It would probably take you 2 or 3 minutes out of the morning to actually repeat that. Now, you can repeat that while you're having a shower. You could repeat that while you're in the car. You could just say that out loud or in your own head every time you've thought about. Every time, let's face it, why not replace all those negative thoughts, the worrying thoughts, the anxious thoughts? Why not replace it with that? I'm rich, abundant and wealthy. And you can change it up. Why not give it a go? You see, experiences will reveal everything to you. Experiences. What I do with my clients, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how rich do you feel? Well, maybe 1. How abundant do you feel? How wealthy do you feel? So you rate it and you commit to doing it 50 times every day. And then after a week or 2, I want you to rate that again. Well, how rich do I feel? Has that number gone up? Because a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. So why not think that thought and see what happens. So I challenge you. Experimental behaviours will reveal more to you than my words. Do it for yourself. Challenge yourself to do something different and see what happens. What have you got to lose? Nothing. I hope that answers the question. Thank you for the question. Wonderful. I'll leave it there. Okay, thank you. Bye.